It's 11:47 at night. You have your phone in your hand, but you've been looking at the same screen for several minutes without really reading anything. Your mind is somewhere else. You're thinking about that person who left, that decision that went wrong, and everything you still don't know how to fix. Then you put the phone on the bed and stare at the ceiling. No one knows what's going on inside you at that moment, but God does. And maybe that's why you still have the strength to get up tomorrow, even though tonight you feel like you have none left. 2. You're driving back home. The traffic light turns red, and for a few seconds, no one can move forward. You turn off the music and silence fills the car. That's exactly when you start thinking about everything you've been avoiding. You don't know what decision to make. You don't know whether to continue or change direction. And you don't know how much longer you can live with this uncertainty. But maybe you don't need to know the entire path to trust God. Sometimes you only need enough light to take the next step. And when that step comes, you'll understand why the previous one never opened. 3. You open your bank account and look at the same number for the third time. You do the math in your head, cut out expenses, and wonder how you're going to solve it. No one sees that worry, because when you leave the house, you smile again as if everything were under control. But worrying about tomorrow can make you forget that you still have today. God never promised that you would never face difficulties, but He did promise that you wouldn't have to go through them alone. Maybe this season isn't here to destroy your trust, but to teach you where it was truly placed. But there's a conversation you've been imagining for weeks. You know exactly what you want to say. You've even rehearsed some phrases in your head, but every time the moment comes, you stay silent. You're afraid of losing that person, afraid of making a mistake, or afraid of hearing an answer you don't want to accept. And while you're protecting that relationship from conflict, maybe you're sacrificing your own peace. God can also give you the courage to speak, a truth you've been hiding for far too long, because some doors don't close when you speak. They close when you keep staying silent. 5. You find an old box while looking for something in your room. Inside are photographs, papers, and things you hadn't seen in years. You pick up a photograph and remember exactly who you were when it was taken. You realize how much you've changed, but also how many dreams you abandoned without even realizing it. Maybe you grew up, but you also learned to settle. And as you look at that photograph, a question appears that you didn't expect. What would have happened if you had continued believing in God and in that dream instead of giving up so soon? 6. It's 6:30 in the morning. The alarm goes off and your first reaction is to turn it off. You don't want to get up. You don't want to face the same responsibilities, the same worries, and that feeling of moving forward without getting anywhere. But eventually you get up, you get ready, you leave. No one knows that this simple act was a small victory. Because sometimes faith doesn't look like a spectacular moment. It looks like getting up one more day and deciding that your story still deserves another try. And maybe tomorrow you'll understand why God gave you strength precisely today. You're sitting at a table while everyone talks and laughs, but you barely participate. You smile so no one will ask what's wrong. A long time ago, you learned that it's easier to say, "I'm fine," than to explain everything you're carrying inside. Then someone asks a simple question, and for a second you're about to tell the truth, but you smile again. God knows that version of you that no one knows, the one that appears when you close the door and can finally stop pretending. And maybe that person you hide from everyone is precisely the one God wants to begin healing. Key. You delete an app from your phone because you know that every time you open it, you end up comparing your life with everyone else's. 5 minutes later, you install it again. It seems like something small, but it represents a much bigger battle. You know what things are stealing your peace, and yet you keep going back to them. We ask God to give us peace, but sometimes we keep feeding the very things that take it away. Maybe you don't need another sign to know what you need to change. Maybe you already know exactly what it is, and you're just waiting to have the courage to let it go. 9. You get home after a horrible day. You close the door, leave your keys on the table, and stand still for a few seconds before taking off your shoes. No one is waiting for you to ask how you're doing, so you take a deep breath and continue with your routine. You prepare something to eat, check your phone, and act as if nothing happened. But God was with you during every minute of that day, even in the moments when you felt like no one could see you. And tomorrow you may face problems again, but you won't have to face them as the same person you were this morning. 10. You're standing in front of a door with your hand on the handle. It's not a real door. It's that decision you've been avoiding for months. Changing jobs, walking away from someone, starting over, forgiving, believing again. You know that if you open it, your life probably won't be the same again. That's why you keep standing there, waiting to feel completely sure. But faith never promised absolute certainty. Sometimes it only promises that God will be with you when you cross through. And maybe when you finally open that door, You'll discover that what you were most afraid of losing was exactly what you needed to leave behind.
It's 3:12 in the morning and you just checked your phone for the 5th time, even though you know perfectly well that no one has replied. You're waiting for a message that probably won't come, an explanation you may never receive, and a sign you've been searching for far too long. You wonder why God allowed that person to leave, if you did something wrong, or if you simply weren't enough. But maybe you're looking at a closed door, while ignoring everything that door was blocking. There are losses that hurt for a while, until you discover what they were protecting you from. 2. You look at yourself in the mirror before leaving and do something no one notices. You smile to check if you still look okay. Then you go out and start another day as if nothing happened. You reply to messages, work, talk to people, and even make jokes. But when you're alone again, that feeling of emptiness returns. You've learned to function even when you're broken. And maybe that's what you need to change. Not keep learning how to hide the pain, but allow God to enter precisely that part of you that you've been protecting for years. 3. You have a goal written down somewhere, but you haven't done anything to get closer to it for months. Every time you think about starting, a different excuse appears. You don't have time, you don't have money, you don't know enough, you're not ready yet. And the worst part is that some excuses even seem reasonable. But while you wait for the perfect moment, the calendar keeps moving forward. Faith doesn't mean sitting and waiting for everything to become easy. It means moving even when you're still afraid. Maybe you don't need God to show you another path. Maybe you need to walk the one already in front of you. 4. You receive good news and your first reaction isn't joy. It's fear. Immediately you think, how long will it last? That says a lot about what your past disappointments did to you. You became so used to losing that even when something good arrives, you're waiting for it to disappear. But God doesn't want you to live celebrating with one hand and protecting yourself with the other. Life cannot be fully enjoyed. When you're constantly preparing yourself for the next blow, maybe part of your healing will be learning to receive something good without immediately expecting the worst. 6. There is an uncomfortable moment after an argument when everyone leaves and you're left alone with your own words. You remember what you said, what the other person replied, and that sentence you know you shouldn't have said. Pride tells you to wait for an apology. Your heart knows that you also have something to acknowledge. And there, one of the most difficult decisions appears: being right or having peace. God can work in a relationship, but first he has to work in the heart of someone willing to lower their defenses. Maybe that call you're avoiding is much more important than you imagine. 6. You're at the supermarket pushing the cart when suddenly you see something that reminds you of someone who is no longer in your life. For a second, everything seems to stop. You keep walking, but that memory stays with you until you get home. That's how pain works. It doesn't always warn you before appearing. But healing doesn't mean stopping yourself from remembering. It means that one day you'll be able to remember without the memory controlling your present. And maybe God doesn't want to erase that part of your story. He wants to teach you how to live after it. 7. You've been busy all day, but when night comes, you discover that you didn't do anything you really needed to do. You answered messages, watched videos, solved other people's problems, and filled every space with noise. Then you wonder why you feel stuck. Sometimes we don't lack time. We have too much distraction. And while we ask God to change our lives, we continue giving our best hours to things that build nothing. Maybe tomorrow you don't need to do more. You need to decide what to stop doing. 8. A notification arrives. It's an opportunity you've been waiting for months. You read it, smile, and for a few seconds you get excited. Then fear appears. What if I can't? That's the part no one sees. We don't always reject opportunities because we don't want them. Sometimes we reject them because they force us to discover what we're capable of. God can open a door, but walking through it is still a human decision. And some opportunities only remain open long enough for you to have the courage to walk through them. Now, you're sitting in the car in front of your house, and you've been there for 10 minutes without getting out. You don't want to go inside yet because you know that when you do, you'll have to face everything you tried to forget during the day. The engine is still running, but you're completely still. Then you remember something you haven't thought about in a long time. There was a time when you asked God for exactly the life you have today, even though it doesn't look the way you imagined it. Maybe you're so focused on what's missing that you forgot to be grateful for what you once asked for. 10. You open an old conversation and find a message from yourself from years ago. You talk about your dreams with a confidence you no longer recognize. You say that one day you're going to achieve it, that you're not going to give up, and that you trust God has something great prepared. You read those words several times, and for the first time, it doesn't hurt because of what someone else did to you. It hurts to realize how much you've changed. But maybe finding that message wasn't a coincidence. Maybe you needed to remember who you were before fear began.
It's 8:06 in the morning, and you're sitting on the edge of the bed looking at your shoes. You don't want to get up, but you also don't want to admit to anyone that you're tired of fighting. So you get dressed, go out, and do the same thing you always do again. The strange thing is that on the outside, your life seems to keep going, while inside, you've been feeling stuck for months. But maybe God isn't waiting for you to feel like starting over. Maybe He's waiting for you to take that small step that proves you still haven't given up. You type, "I need to talk to you," and stare at the screen. 5 minutes pass, 10. Finally, you delete the message. You don't want to seem weak. You don't want to open a wound that still hurts, and much less hear an answer that could change everything. But there are conversations that don't appear to destroy your peace, but to show you where your heart really is. God can also use an uncomfortable conversation to close a chapter you've been trying to keep open for far too long, and maybe what you're avoiding saying is precisely what you need to hear. 3. You're celebrating with everyone, but no one knows that before you arrived, you cried inside the car. You wiped your face, took a deep breath, and walked in smiling. You do it so well that even you begin to believe you're okay. But hiding a wound doesn't mean you've healed it. God doesn't need the strong version you present in front of everyone. He can work with the tired, confused, and wounded version that appears when you close the door of your room. Maybe the change you're looking for begins when you stop saying, "I am fine," in front of the one who already knows you're not. You see that someone who hurt you is living exactly the life you wanted. They have new opportunities, new people, and seem to have forgotten everything that happened. And for a few seconds, you feel something you're ashamed to admit, injustice. You wonder why that person seems to be moving forward while you're still trying to rebuild yourself. But maybe you're looking too much at their path and too little at yours. God didn't ask you to watch someone else's reward. He asked you to guard your heart, because some victories lose all their value when, to achieve them, you have to become someone you no longer recognize. FIPA. You reach the end of the month and do the math. Again, it wasn't enough. You look at your expenses, your responsibilities, and everything that's still missing. For a moment, you feel like you're running on a treadmill. A lot of effort, no progress. But remember something, not all growth first appears in your bank account. Sometimes God is developing discipline before increasing your resources, character before giving you influence, and wisdom before giving you more responsibility. Maybe you're asking for a bigger door when you still haven't discovered what needs to change inside you to sustain it. 6. You wake up after dreaming about someone who is no longer a part of your life. For a few seconds, you forget that they left. Then you remember reality, and that little hit in your chest returns. You wonder why it still hurts if so much time has already passed. Because time doesn't always heal what we never learn to surrender. You can't accept that someone left and still continue carrying what that person left inside you. God cannot change the past, but He can change what that past continues to do to you. And maybe that's the part of the story you still haven't finished. There's an email you've been avoiding opening for days. You know it may contain an important answer, but as long as you don't open it, you can't keep imagining every possible scenario. That's how fear works. Many times we suffer more because of what we imagine than because of what actually happens. We ask God for peace, but we keep feeding 100 possibilities in our heads. Maybe the answer will be good. Maybe it will be difficult. But continuing to run away won't change it either. At some point, you'll have to open the message and discover that uncertainty also had a limit. You're cleaning your room and find something that belonged to a season you swore you had already overcome. You hold it for a few seconds and all the memories return. Before, you would have put it away again.